So thank you again for joining us today for supporting client and therapist development, the experience of developing a specialism in independent practice. And we're really lucky today. We've actually got 3 members of our Band 5 team that are with us live on the webinar. We've got Shannon Ronan, Jen Clark and Caitlin McWilliams. And we've got some lovely video footage from Millie Wyatt, who's one of our other therapists that was unfortunately unable to join us today. So just a couple of pointers before we get started. Please type any questions you might have into the chat box. And as I've said previously, the webinar will be recorded and uploaded to ATtherapy's website and YouTube channel, and you'll get a link to that within the next couple of days. So thanks again, and I will hand you over now to our great team of Band 5 therapists.
Hello everyone, so I just wanted to give a little bit of an idea on what we'll be covering during today's webinar. So we'll start off with some introductions, sort of a bit about our backgrounds, where we come from, what made us choose ATtherapy, a little bit of the background to ATtherapy for those that haven't heard of the company before, a little bit around working within the medico-legal field, what is the ATtherapy way, entering the independent field as a newly qualified practitioner, and then continuing to develop that competence as well whilst with ATtherapy, and then a really good chat on developing a specialism and anecdotes from each of us really in terms of how we've come to be where we are and where we see ourselves going and what that journey's looked like, so to speak, and then some time at the end for some discussion and some questions, and yeah, we'll get underway. So myself, as Nikki introduced, my name is Shannon. I qualified a number of years ago at Cardiff Metropolitan University. So I've been qualified nearly 3 years now. And in that time, I've been with ATtherapy for 7 months. So from September through till now. And thinking about why ATtherapy, I really wanted that sort of increased opportunity to develop that specialism, but amongst lots of other leading experts in the field, because I'm sure we can all appreciate that speech and language therapy, it's quite a small field, and then speech and language therapy in the Northwest, it's probably even smaller field. So it was really that opportunity to work with other leading experts in the field and share that learning within a bigger team. And 2 years prior to working with ATtherapy, as I said, I had experience working as a speech and language therapist in a community adult learning disability team in the NHS. And for our next introduction, as Nikki said at the start, we've got Millie, but Millie has kindly recorded lots of her footage within the slides, so we can hear a little bit about Millie and her introduction now.
Hi, I'm Millie and I completed my master's degree at MMU in September 2021. I wanted to work for ATtherapy so I could develop my specialism quickly in a role which allowed me to work closely with my clients to meet their goals. As I am an NQP, I don't have any prior SLT experience. However, I have worked as a support worker for adults with autism as well as a TA in a special needs school.
I think that leads on to me when I managed to move slides. My name's Jen. I study speech and language therapy as a BSc in Birmingham. I qualified in July 2019, so I've been qualified for about 3 years now, and I've been with ATtherapy for 7 months. The reason that I moved to ATtherapy was because I sought a role with intensive therapeutic input and an opportunity to build working relationships with clients over a long period of time. I think as clinicians, that's something that it's a desire that we share. My previous experience, I spent 2 years working with defendants and witnesses with communication difficulties within criminal and family legal proceedings. So ensuring that they had access to fair hearings of fair trials. And then I'll lead on to Caitlin.
Hi everyone, my name's Caitlin. I've been with ATtherapy for 7 months as well, so I also started in September. That was just after I finished my master's degree, so I did that actually with Millie as well. We did it together at Manchester, and I I applied to ATtherapy really just because it really aligned with my interests. So my main interests are kind of in complex needs and early communicators, AAC, that kind of area. And I know that ATtherapy has had lots of clients that are working on those kind of skills. So that was kind of why I chose them. So that's the four of us. And now I'm going to hand you over back to Jen, who's just going to kind of set the scene about and give a bit of background into the medical legal field, because that's the kind of clients that we work with at ATtherapy.
So I'm going to talk through what is the medico-legal sector for those that haven't heard of it. The majority of our clients at ATtherapy have their therapy funded by a claim that's being pursued for medical negligence or injury, such as a personal injury, for example, a road traffic accident. We've also got clients that receive funding for therapy as a result of a human rights claim. So an example of one of these is a child with disordered attachments due to failings of social services. Our clients typically have a solicitor, a case manager, and a financial deputy overseeing their case and claim. So I'll talk through what each of those persons' roles are. The solicitor, first and foremost, is in charge of the court case. So they'll spend time gathering medical records, medical evidence and testimonies. And their overarching aim is to work on the client's behalf to secure the maximum compensation possible for them. The solicitor will then appoint a case manager, and that's a professional who will oversee the case. So therapeutic input in the medico-legal cases is often coordinated by a case manager because there's lots of professionals involved. So they're sort of our go-to person, and all our reports, aims, equipment requests, and any concerns will go through that case manager. And then finally, we've got a financial deputy, and that's sort of within the name. That's a professional that's appointed by the court who makes decisions about financial matters within the case. And on the next slide, we've got a flow chart just showing a typical medico-legal process. And where we would slot into that is, as the treating therapist, is either in evidence gathering for the claimant. We might provide evidence in terms of our therapeutic input, or right at the bottom there, if it does go to a final hearing, we might be asked to give evidence in that hearing. So we had to think about what was different about working in the medico-legal sector. We compared this to sort of our collective experience within placements, within the NHS, and for myself within the legal system. I'd say the most important difference is that our input is flexible and can be intensive. Because of the way that our funding works, as therapists, we decide what our client needs, what level of input they need, and then we provide a justification to the case manager for that input and a projected costings, and then that's approved, and we can see that client as much as we deem necessary. So it's really client-centered. If somebody needs, to be seen 3 times a week for a short period of time, and that's approved, then we can go ahead and do that. And as I say, it's flexible, so we can, when the client's needs vary, we can go along with that too. Another difference is the way that we work with multidisciplinary teams. And we work really, really closely with the MDTs, and that includes people like parents, other rehab specialists, so physio, occupational therapy, education consultants, psychologists, etc. We have really regular MDTs. I think most of my clients every 3 months, some of them every 6 months. But if you decide that a professionals meeting is needed sooner than that, then again, you go to your case manager and request that, and it's usually accommodated. And we do a lot of joint working within the MDT. There's a lot more opportunity for that than I found in other roles. Again, really client-centered. And to give you an example a little bit outside of the box in terms of MDT working, one of my colleagues got asked to go to a medical appointment, and with the parents of a client, just to sit and listen to the details of a procedure, so that she was then able to provide a detailed and accurate social story for that client afterwards. Another difference is that you might be asked to write equipment justifications. So that's if a client requires any kind of equipment, so anything from toys and games, switch adapted games, bigger purchases like AAC devices, you might be asked to provide a justification report, and that would include sort of why that piece of equipment will be of benefit for the client, how much it will cost, where you can get one from. And the final big difference is that we might be asked to give evidence within legal proceedings, and that can look in two different ways. Firstly, is a witness statement. So typically a solicitor would arrange a meeting with a therapist and talk them through what evidence is needed, and then assist with writing that statement together, and that would be provided to the court. Or secondly, we might be asked to attend court and give oral evidence. No one at ATtherapy so far, touch wood, has gone to court, because often the case settles just before, but lots of our therapists have been summoned, and sometimes the settlement is very, very close to that hearing. I think the last one, less than a week before she was due to give evidence, the case settled. So it can be quite hair-raising. But I feel reassured. I don't know about the rest of the team. I feel reassured that we've got such a big team, and they were all so helpful that we'd have all the support we needed, and the solicitor there as well to assist you with that. So that leads me on nicely to Caitlin, who's going to talk about our practice at ATtherapy.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So I'm just going to give a bit more background to how ATtherapy work, because we are quite a unique kind of setup really within the independent field. So firstly, just to kind of describe how our team works, you can see the picture of a lot of our team on this slide. It's not everyone. It's actually only Shannon out of the four of us who are doing this webinar today who's actually on that. I think the rest of us were on holiday that day. But as well as the people in that picture who are mainly our speech and language therapists and therapy assistants, we've also got assistive technologists on the team. So their role is to deal with kind of environmental control and more kind of techie tech access with high-tech AAC. We've got assistive technologist assistants as well, and then we've got our AT mentor team as well. So they're really unique to ATtherapy, and they are a group of individuals who are expert AAC users. So we're kind of, they're role models really for some of our younger clients. So they're fab, and they're really valuable for some of our younger clients who are kind of finding their feet with these quite high-tech AAC systems. We've got our business support team, and then obviously we've got our clinical managers and directors as well. So that's the team. It is a nice big team, and we're going to talk through about working collaboratively, a little bit about clinical independence, and then right at the end of the webinar we'll talk about progression and kind of where the four of us are on our journeys to developing a specialism. But just to mention that ATtherapy really do kind of encourage developing a specialism, and that's been a really nice part of working for the team. So the next slide. So I kind of think there's kind of two sides really to working collaboratively. We've got working within the ATtherapy team, and then we've got within the wider MDT team. And both of these are going to support client and therapist development. But as you can see from the picture on the screen, the client is right in the middle of everything that we do. And that's obviously the reason why we're all here, and all those other professionals are here as well. So I think everything's kind of directed towards developing that client's skills, but really nicely it sort of supports, indirectly supports therapist development as well. So I'll just talk a bit more about that within the team. So within ATtherapy, we've got lots of opportunities for shadowing. So often that might be because another member of the team has a specific specialism. So we've got quite a few dysphagia trained therapists on the team. So if a client needs dysphagia input, then you'd go to them for advice or input. We've got our fantastic SLTAs and ATAs, the assistants. So they would really support kind of completing blocks of work, making resources, and then really embedding skills within different settings. Our AT mentors, who I alluded to earlier, but those sessions would be led by the AT mentors. They might be attended with the speech and language therapist as well, just to kind of facilitate that session if the client wanted to, or if they needed to. We have our in-house CPD days. So we've got 2 of these coming up in October, and they're just a great place for knowledge to be shared kind of across the team. We're not usually in one place all together that often, apart from staff meetings and these kind of CPD days. So it's really nice to share any trainings that we've been on, or we might have company reps that come in to talk about other kind of new technologies or new products and things. And then, of course, we've got more informal ways of collaborative working. So we've got a team WhatsApp group, and we're kind of always calling each other, and that's quite nice for long drives, because we do drive around quite a bit. So lots of different ways, including these webinars, of course. So that's ways that we might share knowledge within our team, and then also with families and with other people that are supporting our clients, or anyone else that's interested. Sorry, Jen, can I just go back to that other slide? Thank you. Just then I'll talk about within the MDT as well. So these, we might do reviews when, I think luckily really with, as an independent therapist, we kind of get invited to the statutory meetings and also the independent ones. So we're attending team meetings with other professionals fairly regularly, and these are really good opportunities to review client development. And I have to say, I think joint working are some of my favourite sessions. I learn loads doing these. I kind of learn the answers to things that I wasn't really even didn't know about a lot of these things. So just to give you an example of some of the things that I've done joint sessions on, I've worked with OTs on switch access and switch positioning. I've worked again with other different OTs on creating like a therapy program for someone, and we put both of our goals in there, so it was really collaborative goal setting, and then this program kind of functionally worked on all of those goals in a really easy way for the care team to oh, I think we've lost our presentation.
Apologies, my internet dropped out then. I'll just share it again for you.
Here we go. So that was really useful time that we could do that kind of shared goal setting. I've worked with visual impairment specialists. So one of my clients is an eye gaze user. She's got cortical visual impairment, so it's not completely clear what it is that she can see and the kind of the function of that in relation to using her eye gaze and that being her access method. So I did a joint session with her, and that was so useful in terms of what cell size we needed to be looking at, whether we needed high contrast symbols. And actually after that session we re-looked at all of the software that she had on her device, and we really just refreshed it all. And I have to say that's been really useful, because that's really helped her kind of progress with her therapy. I've got some music therapy sessions coming up, which I'm really excited about. I haven't had those yet, but I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And then the final thing we do jointly, we've worked with other organisations such as Ricolo, who are a psychology organisation. So we've developed the My Ability Packs, which are resources to support somebody to understand their diagnosis and what that means for them. Okay, so clinical independence. Just touching on this, I think it's an important aspect of the job, kind of in the background of things, just to develop that specialism, but these are quite helpful things to think about. So some of you attending might be speech and language therapists as well. So I appreciate speech and language therapy is quite an independent profession anywhere that you work, especially if you're community based. You're often managing your own diary, and that's definitely the case here in ATtherapy as well. We all manage our own diaries, and that means that we have quite a bit of flexible working, so in place and in time. So in place, we might be attending sessions all across the Northwest or even further beyond for some of our therapists, and so in between that time we might need to attend MDTs from all sorts of locations, whether it's a staff room or sometimes even in your car. And then the flexible hours as well. So if we've got clients that have like an early therapy session or maybe one that needs to be after school, and then we can be flexible about that as well. And then, as John mentioned before, one of the things about working in the medical legal sector is that recommendations for therapy are really based on client need, rather than capacity or resources. So that's something that personally I really like about working in this field. And then at the bottom there, we've just got again about that independence to work with other professionals that you might deem necessary for the development of that client. So I think Millie's coming up next. So oh, she started speaking. I'm going to leave her to it. Jen, sorry, we can't actually hear Millie. I think maybe we need to share the sound again this time. Sorry, everyone. This was we have to remember to share the sound when we're sharing the screen. Otherwise, we realised we couldn't hear Millie speak. So we'll just stop sharing and then we'll join it again. So Millie's just going to talk about what it looks like for when me and her joined ATtherapy as newly qualified practitioners.
So now we're going to be discussing what it's been like entering the field as a newly qualified practitioner. We'll be discussing the NQP competencies as well as the Band 6 competencies, the support we receive and the different form it takes, the training we have both received and are now delivering, and the progression into Band 6. So first we will be discussing the NQP competencies and how myself and Caitlin have been working towards them within this role. Working within the NHS was all I'd experienced during my time as an SLT student, so I was a little unsure of how I would work towards my competencies within this role and outside of the NHS. My main concern was not having that direct clinical contact with my supervisor on a regular basis, particularly with the amount of lone working within this role. So how do I work towards my competencies within this role? When it came to beginning my work on my competencies, I began gathering my own evidence when I had the time and space to do so. I find half-terms, school holidays are the best time for me to work on my competencies and any CPD I have identified the need for. Next, I send everything I've gathered to my supervisor, who reviews it and highlights any further evidence required. Next are the areas within the competencies which require a supervisor to observe me clinically and sign off the corresponding competencies. To achieve this, I will organise a shadowing day with my supervisor to observe my sessions with a variety of clients. This part of my competencies, like many NQPs before me, I was initially hesitant about. However, what I have found is the space I have been given to be clinically independent and make those decisions without the presence of a supervisor has given me the opportunity to develop my clinical knowledge and decision-making skills and be confident with my outcomes. Due to this development, I am confident and hopeful that when my observations do take place, they will go well. Next, we will be discussing the support we have received as NQPs and as therapists who are new to independent practice and the medical legal sector. When I first started this role, I was initially overwhelmed by the medical legal process and the difference between what I had been taught at university and what it is really like to work within independent practice. However, we were provided with lots of support to help guide us through this. During our first weeks, we were given training, the freedom to shadow other therapists and explore what resources were available to us without the added pressure of a full caseload. As we progressed within our roles, the support continued. As Band 5s, we spend some time together each week and engage in a peer supervision. This enables us to discuss any clinical cases that we are finding difficult, and we are able to find solutions to them as a team. Talking through clients and cases often gives us the confidence that we are providing appropriate therapy to work towards our clients' goals and targets.
Hello, sorry, that's my cue now. So really, I wanted to sort of follow on what Caitlin and Jen and Millie have already been discussing, really around the idea of competence and around developing that competence really as well. And in doing so really, and in thinking a little bit more about what it means to develop competence, that the students in the room will have to help me here if this is something that's familiar to them. But whilst I was putting this presentation together and the conversations and discussions we had around the content and in each of our journeys and how we feel we're developing, I harked my mind back to something I learned about called the conscious competence model. And it's something that was taught to me at university, really. And I think it's helpful for all of us, honestly, from time to time to look back on something like this and remind myself almost of how much of a journey it is in sort of developing a specialism and developing any new skill, really. I mean, be it personally or professionally. I'm sure we can all hark back to a time where we might have been learning piano or learning guitar, or for me, scrambling through learning how to do different yoga moves and things like that. It's difficult at first. There's a lot of change and there's a lot of learning and there's a lot of getting things wrong to get it right again, to speak to your friends, to speak to your colleagues. That sort of ouch step, second stage, where you're developing that conscious incompetence. You know there's something not quite right, but you're aware of it. And that's where a lot of that learning and change comes from, really. Where we just sort of need to sit back, reflect and learn in those very early stages about what it is we're not quite getting and how to seek support from that. And thinking about this is definitely something, particularly that second step, that ouch stage, where there's a lot of learning happening, is something I can definitely still relate to with certain clinical areas that I might be feeling a little bit less confident around, which is where the sort of support and the supervision that Millie and Caitlin discussed really sort of comes into play, and how important it really is to have that core support, those conversations, those CPD opportunities to perhaps start making that step upwards a little bit when we start thinking about that model. But generally, if there's a takeaway from my slide and from sort of discussing of competence, really, it's just a reminder that it's all right from time to time to reflect and spend some time at that early stage. And I think that's what we've all been learning over these past 7 months is to be okay at that stage and how to move on with it with the support of our team. So thinking a little bit more about developing competence, as somebody that's been qualified for almost 3 years now, I'm currently working towards my Band 6 competencies with ATtherapy. And this is a framework that's been developed by the ATtherapy team in line with documentation such as the Band 6 job description, the RCSLT framework, the key skills framework. So really we know that when we're creating these opportunities, and when we're learning, we're developing in line with what a Band 6 would be expected to do. So as a result, we have a Band 6 competence framework that's been developed, and these include many core capabilities. Hopefully you can see the screenshot there of the Band 6 document, but it includes areas such as training, clinical knowledge, skills and abilities, our communication skills, what we gain through our experiences. And the benefits of having such a wide team of specialists to learn from is that it provides opportunities for that sort of experiential CPD. I couldn't think of a way to word it that made sense to me, but by experiential CPD, I think we can all agree how beneficial it would be to set some time aside during a quieter period of the day or of the week, or just really sort of spend some time reading and researching and gathering resources around a particular topic, which is fantastic. But the thing I think since joining ATtherapy that I've really benefited from is that reaching out to other therapists and really sort of owning, asking for help, and sort of banding yourself up from that second step to that third step a little bit more in that model from the previous slide. But learning through shadowing and learning through joint case discussions and learning through doing lots and lots together with sort of maybe more specialist colleagues in a particular area you're interested in. And it's being a part of ATtherapy really that really offers you the flexibility within your working day to do that and to take those opportunities on and to learn as you go, and to learn through experience, which I previously hadn't experienced before joining ATtherapy. And importantly, if we've got something like a framework to follow for developing our competence, it gives us that clear sense of progression. We know what we need to do, what we need more help with, and how we can really sort of start developing our own skills to take that next step. And this is something as well that is sort of routinely monitored and supported within the team. Earlier in this year, I think it was this year, yeah, earlier in this year, there was actually the creation of something like an informal supervision Band 5 document. And that's for maybe Band 6 or Band 7 colleagues to start thinking about and filling in if we've ever done something to capture those ad hoc moments, you know, a phone call, a case discussion, a joint visit. Let's capture those moments of shared learning, of you know, experiential CPD or ad hoc supervision, and really support sort of ourselves as developing clinicians really to evidence that competence really and to learn as we go. And as I said, I think that's something that we're really lucky to experience here, that we have such a wide range of people to pick the brains on and to really provide those sort of ad hoc chances to learn and to develop and grow. So just a little bit of an example taken from some of my recent practice when I'm thinking about developing my competence. So in February of this year, I was given the opportunity to attend an online court of protection conference by Symptoms. And in order to do that, I had to complete a training justification form, sort of evidence sort of why it would be beneficial for me to attend, how I could share my knowledge with the team, how we could network at those opportunities. And if we're looking at our core capabilities again, and we're thinking, okay, so training, evidence of successful completion of a short course or a relevant training session, and then with the idea to then feed back on that during the staff meeting. And now with our CPD, like Caitlin said earlier, with the CPD days, we're encouraged to really bulk together any training or CPD days that we've been on. It goes into a shared space within sort of our drives. And it's moments like that we can really sort of share our learning and you know, we can talk about what we've learned and really encourage that sort of shared learning really. And again, that'll be evidence towards contributing towards that training competence. So it's super easy to reach out to colleagues and to find opportunities really, and it's really encouraged just to sort of learn more and develop that competence with things that you do. So thinking a little bit about target setting, so linked to the development of competence really is the focus that we have on setting targets during our appraisal windows, and these will be geared towards a personal target, a business target and a team target. And these link closely to my goals really as a developing therapist, and thinking about our journeys towards developing that specialism, considering team and business targets in particular. It allows for more open discussion around where we feel, you know, there might be gaps within our service that we might be able to contribute towards filling, or that we might be able to you know, create more of a discussion on if we've really thought about something where we feel as though, okay, there's a gap there, or oh, I'd really like to know more about this in this area. And then it can contribute towards a team target to maybe, you know, educate the team a little bit more wider on that particular area of interest of yours. So for example, myself, I'm really interested in learning more about high-tech AAC systems, particularly principles of aided language stimulation and modelling, but importantly, how to make that applicable to our communication partners within a school or within a home environment. So one of my targets and something that I'm thinking more and more about is the development of training videos, of accessible resources, just for our communication partners at home, where we're sort of delivering this advice and this guidance, but how else can we give it? What other formats can we give it in, really? And then secondary, sort of thinking about my supervisory skills as a developing sort of therapist, particularly thinking about that band 6 competence really is developing my skills in supervision as well. And once these targets are all agreed, opportunities are offered to contribute towards the attainment of these targets. So for example, thinking above about that supervisory goal that I have of mine, it's been identified that a placement education facilitation training day would be something that would be beneficial for me to attend, and it's encouraged just to highlight how we can work towards achieving that target, really.
I first became interested in becoming an SLT.
Sorry, I should introduce. It's
All
Millie.
right.
She's joined us again now. Now we're just going to think about have a bit more of an open discussion, really, and think about what brought us to ATtherapy, where we feel we are at in the journey towards our specialism, and Millie is sort of first to discuss her journey towards developing that specialism, really.
First became interested in becoming an SLT when I was a TA in a special school in Melbourne. I supported a full class of students, but there was one particular boy I spent most of my time with. He found it incredibly difficult to transition between activities and often became upset and inconsolable throughout the day. Following some input from the allied health team, we decided I would use a whiteboard to write down information so we could process this in a different way. Following this, he became a much happier child with more manageable behaviours. Seeing his progress and the impact of functional communication for him inspired me to become an SLT, so I moved back to the UK and to start my Masters in 2019. I also received speech therapy myself when I was a child for my speech sounds. This is something I struggle with today, however I feel it gives me a small insight into what some of my clients may experience, and I feel it makes me a more compassionate and understanding SLT. With this in mind, I always imagined my specialism would be ASC and AAC. Throughout my course, this remained high priority on my list of interests, but I also found brain injury and youth offending an interesting area. Therefore, when Caitlin told me about a position at ATtherapy becoming available, I immediately...
Oh, sorry, I don't know what happened there. I'm not sure where we're up to.
In 2019. With this in mind, I always imagined my specialism would be ASC and AAC. Throughout my course, this remained high priority on my list of interests, but I also found brain injury and youth offending an interesting area. Therefore, when Caitlin told me about a position at ATtherapy becoming available, I immediately applied. I am still working towards discovering what area I will specialise in, however I am currently enjoying working with SEMH and brain injury clients. I enjoy the complexity of the cases and find this pushes me to develop my clinical knowledge and experience. As for AAC, I still enjoy this area, however I don't think this is something I will specialise in. However, this may change and I am excited to see where my career will take me.
Wonderful, thank you. So Well, firstly, I just want to point out that I am only 7 months into being a speech and language therapist. So what I'm going to be talking about is kind of where I am now with it. But I'm well aware that it might change in the years that follow. So yeah, just sort of where I'm up to now. I'm kind of reassured by other colleagues that have had a bit of a change in path. So one of our other therapists, Emma, she actually started off within an NHS role, and her specialism was AAC. But when she came to ATtherapy, she did start off in AAC as well, but she sort of since developed an interest and a really high specialism in SEMH. So she's kind of our go-to really for SEMH clients and advice. So it's not to say that she doesn't do AAC anymore, and sometimes she might have a client that's working on SEMH skills, but then via their AAC device. So I think that's quite a nice example of how specialisms and interests can kind of take different paths and then come back to interact later on as well. So personally, I became interested in speech and language therapy when I worked as a carer for a young man with cerebral palsy. So he had quite significant health needs. He had spastic quadriplegia and was pre-verbal. And I'd kind of been working with him for a number of months. I was getting on board with kind of all of the washing and dressing, medication, that kind of thing. I was kind of doing okay with that, but I was kind of aware that I wasn't really doing anything communication wise. And to be honest, I didn't really have any idea of what his level of understanding was, or how to interpret some of his quite subtle signals like eye movements and things. And then one Saturday, I was working with a carer that I had not worked with before. And I was just really struck by how much time she was giving to this man to offer him choices, and she was really just observing him and looking for any signs that he might be responding in one way or another, and then repeating it as well so that she could look at the consistency of that response. And I was so struck by how much this kind of increased his independence and his control. And so I got chatting to her about it, and it turned out she was studying a speech language therapy master's. So lo and behold, there we go, and that's how I started several years later. And that kind of interest in complex needs has stayed with me really. So my previous jobs have kind of been working with SEND in schools as well, and with other adults with disabilities and things like that. And then since starting at ATtherapy, really, right from the interview stage, I had those discussions with the directors about what my interests were, and explained about it being within early communicators, and they were kind enough to kind of tailor my client base to that. So most of my clients are early communicators, and I'm doing a lot of work on intentional communication and kind of building up those skills through play. So that's the kind of thing I really like to do in my sessions as well. So it's just really nice to be able to draw on those interests throughout my practice as well, and hopefully I'll get further opportunities to develop that through training and other things that we will have the opportunity to do. Okay, so Jen's going to talk about hers next.
So in terms of a sort of backstory as to why I was interested in speech and language therapy, I don't have one. I think I knew I wanted to be in a caring role, but how that looked for me, I wasn't sure. So I think it was about 6 months before we had to apply for uni that I really started to look at my options, and I'd considered all the different caring professions. So I think my main focus at the time was physiotherapy. But it wasn't until my mum said, "Have you thought about speech and language?" And I'll be honest, I hadn't even heard of it at that point. So I had a quick read, I had a Google, opened a prospectus, And from reading it, was set at that point that's what I wanted to do. Obviously from uni, I ended up in quite a specialised role, quite specific with defendants in the legal system. I think probably the main reason that I ended up in that role and interested in that area, I was on jury service in the summer between my first and second year of university, and I witnessed firsthand a defendant who had clear communication difficulties, and there was nothing in place in that courtroom to facilitate his communication. When he was given evidence, he didn't understand what was being asked of him, and yet questions were being fired ahead anyway. And the way that my other jury members perceived that and used that in making their decision about whether he was guilty or not, it actually really saddened me. And at the same time, fascinated me. So I had those discussions with the jury members at the time and sort of was able to share my knowledge, limited at that point, but share my knowledge with them, and have some influence over that. So when I saw that there was a role that sort of bridged that gap, it really interested me. But after a couple of years in that job, I sort of started to seek out more rapport with my clients, an extended period, more therapeutic input. And that's when I found ATtherapy. And when I interviewed, I obviously shared my interest in sort of SEMH, so social, emotional, mental health needs, members of the population who are either identified as a risk for being offenders or sort of already on that path. But when I started, I was given a very varied caseload. I've got children with speech sound disorders, AAC users, early communicators. I've got an adult with aphasia, so it's really, really broad, as well as lots of clients with SEMH needs. And I'm actually enjoying experiencing all the different areas. I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to see that rather than going straight into SEMH and sort of identifying that as my preferred specialism. I'd like to continue to explore all the different areas before I sort of settle on one, because I think it's very different once you're qualified and you're working in those areas to having your experience through uni and through placement. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Don't have a specialism identified as of yet, but I think in the back of my mind, SEMH is there, but we will see where I'm at in the future.
How is myself? So in the process of putting this presentation together with the girls, really, it's been helpful personally to sort of reflect on my progress towards developing a specialism. And I'd encourage sort of those of you with us to ask each other these questions a lot more often, because I've learned so much just from putting this together and talking to other therapists, talking to the girls about how they came to be where they are. And because I think really in such a short space of time, when I thought about the word specialism, I think about that final step, that sort of, unconscious competence step where people are just naturally gifted, naturally sort of successful in their chosen areas of field without really giving enough credit to that development part. And that's something really that I've come to realise and to really reflect on in the process of putting this presentation together, really. So prior to working with ATtherapy, I had 2 years experience working for the NHS in an adult learning disability team. And there have been aspects on my transition from the NHS into the independent sector that I have found quite challenging, but I definitely feel as though I'm starting to overcome. The first thing really being a little bit of a double-edged sword, which is the variety across the caseload. So, for example, my caseload, similar to Jen's, is currently quite varied. It is mostly paediatric, which, having 2 years adult experience, surprisingly actually found the skills to still be quite transferable. So that worry was squashed quite early on, really. But with the variety in my caseload, for example, I've got children working with speech sounds, oral placement work, higher level language skills. I've got clients with higher tech AAC systems, and similarly to Caitlin, I've got some early communicators, but we're working on things like objects of reference and intensive interaction. And balancing really a medico-legal caseload with being school-based 1 day a week, which a few of us are, because those services do work quite differently as well. And whilst this allows for plenty of opportunities to continue to work out what my specialism is and to be exposed to lots of different therapies and lots of different client groups, it did leave me feeling a little bit overwhelmed at first. But I think that's where having that strong sort of core support system and those opportunities for CPD and those sort of wobbly ouch moments on that second step have really sort of helped me sort of get over that and to talk through really. So having access at ATtherapy to more resources and more equipment, which is something that I didn't previously have as much access to, it's allowed me to really think about different communication devices, different communication softwares, piquing my interest, and it's something that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to explore hadn't it have been for joining ATtherapy really. So whilst similar to Jen, I don't have a specialism as of yet, I'm sort of finding a lot of interest in those higher tech AC systems and how we can sort of contribute towards how those are implemented and how we can support our users to access more of those really. So that's I think where my head's starting to go a little bit, but I'm just pleased in knowing that it takes time. And that's something I don't think I gave enough credit for initially was how much time and how much freedom we're given to make those choices for ourselves. So that's me.
Thank you so much. That was absolutely brilliant. I'm sure everyone's found it really, really useful. So it takes us on to our discussion now. So if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. Or even just any comments about how you found today. It'd be really nice to share those with the team that have presented today. We did have a question from Leith, who, for those of you who don't know Leith, he's one of our AT mentors, a great member of our team. He was asking about the standard time frame for becoming an expert witness from qualifying as a speech and language therapist. So Fran, who's one of our clinical managers and highly specialist speech and language therapists, has given a really great answer about that, kind of explaining that there isn't really a set time frame, but you often need to be a highly specialist therapist who works in the relevant field and has undertaken witness training. There are quite a few ways to do that, including courses at Bond Salon. So Laura, who's another one of our highly specialist therapists, has just asked, what would be your advice for a student considering whether NHS or independent speech therapy may suit them best?
That's a really good question. I had that same question when I was looking for jobs, and attended quite a few kind of like webinars and things to try and get me thinking about those things. And I think the thing I would say is most important is actually not considering those two as different parts of the field. It's actually looking at the team instead and looking at the support that team might give you and the areas of specialism within that team. So one NHS team might have quite a different structure to a different independent organisation. So I think just asking those questions about support and supervision and access to that kind of those shared moments that we were talking about with working within the team is probably you're going to find the most important.
I think that's great advice, Caitlin.
I'd say as well, just adding to that, like, don't be afraid to try both, because I think I've now experienced sort of, albeit it was 2 years with the NHS, but I've sort of experienced both sides, and it's just not shutting yourself off really to anything, and just sort of taking in as much as you can, and taking in what the team stand for, what specialisms they represent, what they can offer you, how you can develop yourself with them as well. But I think it's not shutting anything off too soon. because I think sometimes there might be the tendency to follow like a one-track mind with things, but just keep your options open and just don't say no, just take everything in. Say no, but keep your options open, and just sort of really take experiences as they come, I'd say, looking at both sides.
Great advice. Okay, well, Jen, if you'd mind taking us on to the next slide now, that would be great. We do have a lot of other resources that are available on our YouTube channel and also our Instagram accounts, which are all available for you to see here, and they'll really help keep you up to date. On our next slide, you'll also see we do have some Play Included training coming up during the summer of 2022, which is an approach that was previously known as Lego-based therapy. So please get in touch or have a look on Eventbrite for more information about that. And then our last slide today is just about our next lunchtime webinar, which we're again really excited about. Fran Sefton, who I mentioned earlier, will be presenting alongside some qualified specialist teachers of the vision impaired from Stockport Sensory Support Service. And they'll be talking about working together as speech therapists and VI teachers and how to work alongside each other to develop a client's communication. So that will take place on Thursday, the 26th of May from 12 till 1. We really hope that we'll see most of you there, and just thank you for listening again. And if anyone does have any follow-up questions, please feel free to email them over to info@attherapy.co.uk. Thanks again, Shannon, Caitlin, Jen, for your presentation, and to Millie as well, although she wasn't here. I'm going to stop the record now.